Okay, this is Dr. Mark Carriage with another YouTube video session on groups. This is for professionals only, professionals in mental health, that is. There's a lot of the usual garbled language we use in the field, and some of it is unexplained and assumed that people know what it is. But again, it is not for kids, it's not for teens, it's not for non professionals, professionals in the field. This is a YouTube session part on group part 6, group leadership style and characteristics. Now, a little bit about myself. I've been around for 45 years or more. Been doing groups since '84. I got a bachelor's degree in psychology at SIU Edwardsville. I got a master's in counseling from St. Louis U, PhD in counseling from in 1985 from St. Louis U, and my master's was finished in '81 from St. Louis U in counseling. Counseling psychology internship from Texas Tech from '84 to '85. I've been in the prison system for over 40 years in different routes, venues, mostly in corrections. Um, I'm currently working in a private practice under Chad Welch at um, Metro East Counseling in Swansea, Illinois. And yes, we're in the Metro East of St. Louis. I'm currently consulting at TCI as we're building a really outstanding program for youth who have sexual aggressive issues. It's a residential facility for youth. Okay, so I can be reached at mcarich at AOL.com. And you can call me Dr. Mark, refer to me as Dr. C, Dr. Mark. I've been called a lot of different things, depends on where I was at the time, by all levels of the aspects of hierarchies at corrections. Matt Adams is not with us today. He is a member of the team, and he is the one that's kind of inspired me to do this. I didn't even think about it prior to this, and is helping me. As you can tell, I'm new at it. So what's this module all about? It's group leadership as well as the therapist style. I think the two go hand in hand, frankly. So they're intertwined. So we're going to look at both. So what's leadership style? Well, every therapist or group leader has a style. Yalom has pinpointed 4 different types of styles that seem to be meaningful in group work. Yalom is one of the guru. He's a psychiatrist slash therapist in group work. He's retired now, but he is like one of your group heroes, if you will. Okay, he came up with 4 group uh, leadership characteristics, including high on meaning or attribution, assigning meaning to things in group. It's kind of helpful to know what things mean, dynamics and such. Caring, he said, caring alone isn't enough, but necessary. So you can be all caring and all that in group, but it's not enough to move the group. It's not enough to help members resolve issues. Moderate use of emotional stimulation. In other words, you don't want to get the group too emotionally excited, although I have before. I've done all these things before, and but he said a moderate use of emotional stimulation and low moderate of executive functioning. Now, if you're working with a higher aggressive element or members that have a higher level antisociality, then you want more executive function. But you don't want an authoritarian environment, believe me. Not that way too. Some more definition. So emotional stimulation means that you really get into people's feelings. You let them express their feelings. You're confronting folks, challenging people. If you don't like the word confrontation, um, getting into a lot of different things with stimulating questions, some direct interventions, confrontation, encouragement of disclosure. So, what does that mean? It becomes a feeling group. What we do know is that's alone is not enough to move the group or to solidify change within members' issues. Caring, I already mentioned, caring in whatever expressive form you want, like protecting members. Sometimes you have to do that. Displays of affect and support. Sometimes you do that. Praise and encouragement. You definitely do that. You want to reward positive responses, expressions of worth, genuineness, etc. Um, you want to model relationships how it's supposed to go, and encouragement with feedback. Again, it's necessary but not sufficient to deal with change. Now we're back to the meaning or attribution. That means you well, I'm going to say you should in quotation marks have an understanding of how you think about life, how you think about therapy, dynamics, group work, etc. So you can help the group understand the process and explanations of what's going on, some interpretations of what's going on, the reality of the group, and provide some framework to understand the change process. And I would say dynamics as well. Executive functioning. What does that mean? That means that you're established the law and order, the rules are established, and you help and follow maintaining the procedure. Um, and again, he said that low, moderate use of that. Because you got you can't let one person talk the whole time. So you have to manage the time. You got to direct the sequence of movement. It's like running a play almost, I guess. I never ran a play, but to me, it would be like directing a play because you're directing the players. Some you do decision making, some interceding. Again, make sure the rules are being followed. Now, Bill Marshall, he is absolutely was the most outstanding clinical researcher in the world in the clinical work of treating sexual aggression. Um, he passed away this last year. However, he is my hero in this field. Different fields, you have to have different heroes, and definitely is my hero. So, in this little thing, I'll talk about what his research with sexual aggression um, indicated was the best style for a therapist, if you will. I'll discuss Jeffrey Kotler, who later on came out with some characteristics of what he thought was a good style. And then I think I threw my 2 cents in there. I'm sure I did. I don't know why I wouldn't, as to what's going on. So if you look at some basic stuff, you want to be encouragement. I would say encourage and have the courage and willingness to be vulnerable at different points in time. Depends on what type of group you're running, etc. And if you make an error, admit to it. It doesn't kill anybody to admit to your errors because imperfection is a thing. Perfection does not exist. Modeling. So you want to model what's appropriate. You want um, some emotional presence and attendance, carrying warmth and concern. The usual Kharkov dimensions, support, respect. And this was with a clientele that committed um, sexual aggressions. I do not like to use the word offenders anymore. That's substituting the slides. So anyway, but you got to value people at where they're at, or you're not going to really make the progress you think you might make otherwise. Leaders' openness to be open to things, not real reserved, and non-defensive in dealing with comments and confrontations, issues, attacks within the group and to you. You want to have personal power. You got to have some stamina to do a group, and you have to have influential power, if you will. Be dynamic quality of leadership. You don't want to come in and act like a wall. And again, you have to be able to withstand the pressure with stamina. Willingness is to seek new experiences within the process. Being self-aware of yourself. I would say others aware as well. A sense of humor, because some stuff you're going to think is funny in the group, and outside the group, it may not be funny, and nobody may understand. But in the group, it seems to take on a humor of itself, and you have to have a sense of self humor to bounce around. It helps to be creative or being inventive. I prefer the word creative. A style balanced with procedure, yet process. You got to allow the process to emerge. That means flexibility, structure, but not overly rigid. Um, I've already mentioned a couple of these. I will say it helps to be directive to a degree, but you have to have the flexibility in there. Empathy and warmth and respect, all the Kharkov dimension stuff plays a role. And I already mentioned the rest of it, but the process thing, you want people to be able to process. This is just another duplication of that. So Bill Marshall did some tedious research, which he personally told me he would never have done again because it was tedious. But I'm sure his grad students were busy cranking it out. One thing about Bill is he always shared his work with his graduate students and then gave them co-ownership of a lot of it, most of it. Uh, anyway, he came out with, well, your style has to be balanced with procedure, and I want to say and process. So you got to follow some guidelines in these types of groups, but yet you have to allow for flexibility and structure, which is not over rigid. Again, flexibility, directive to a degree, but not overly directive. But yet you have to manage the group. It's your job to manage the group. Um, One time he told me he was observing. That's where they did the research in the UK because everything was standardized and everything was manualized because then Dr. Mann really thought that was the way to go. Him and Dr. Mann had a debate in some journal about over manualization and blah, blah, blah. He was the opposite. He liked process. She liked everything had to be manualized. And a guy named Dr. Holland out of the UK compromised, said there's room for everything, kind of an integrated thing. But anyway, he was telling me they were over in England, sitting in a group, and a group comes in. A guy said he had something to talk about. His wife just passed that weekend before. He was very upset over it, and he wanted to discuss it. And the therapist said, "No, no, no, not today. We're on page 70 of this manual, and this is what we got to do today." He says, "But I'm very upset, blah, blah, blah." And she said, "No, we're on page 70." Now, right there is very highly structured, very directive, and overly rigid. Bill did a timeout motion and said, "Put your manual up. We're going to talk about his loss." And of course, then he relates it to other people in the group. Okay, he said empathy, respect. Again, the Kharkov dimensions play a role. Process. he was kind of into processing things. He did give a task assignments, but then he had them processed in group. If you strictly do a psycho ed group, you're going to get a superficial intellectual level of change and learning. With process, you hit the emotional uh, components and move the change process, change the beliefs at emotional level, if you will. Humor, you have to find stuff that's humorous in group. You can't be a prude and be stiff. You got to be more loose, more flexible. Encounter, you got to engage the clientele. You got to engage the group. You got to be supportive, challenging when needed, not overly confrontational, and certainly not the shame based punitive crap, which some people are still doing to this day. And non judgmental. Who's the judge what, really? And that's what the research said. He also put it in his 2011 book. And then as time goes on, we highlighted a few other things. I think the we was me. Anyway, you don't want to come across narcissistic. You don't want to come across very authoritative or dictatorship. There is no kings in group. Now, you are in charge of the group, but you don't act like a king. Okay, not overly passive. You don't want people, the group, just to roll over everybody and this and that. It's a mess. Um, you got to be plugged in. You can't be removed. You have to be comfortable with the material, the clients, the subject matter, etc., the issues, if you will. You have to be aware of your own issues because a lot of times things get triggered, and there is that thing called transference where clients will transfer or project materials onto the therapist, and counter transference where the therapist will then return projecting back onto the client based on emotional issues. And that's what you don't want. Or you want to at least monitor. If it does come out, you want to utilize it. And so that gets to the point. You have to not only be aware of your issues as a therapist, but you don't use the group time to work on your stuff. Get your own freaking therapist or your own group. You got to have stamina to withstand the endurance of all this stuff going on in group. You got to have some structure with um, flexibility, but it all has to be conducive to change. You're directing the group or the treatment, yet flexibility within that. You want to avoid power struggles. I've been in them really, and I always thought early on that you had to win them. That's all nonsense. It's just stupid to get in them. I mean, there's no point really, unless you're doing it for a point. I can't think of. That's different. Okay, you want to allow expression of emotions. And if you make a mistake in group, which you will, because you're human, it's okay to say, hey, I screwed up, blah, blah, blah. And take responsibility for mistakes. Um, Actually, the group will look up to you for that. Now, at some point, you don't want to be a rollover. Like one time, I forgot what I said. I said something in group, blah, blah, blah. And the guy, another group member called me on it, and I said, yeah, okay, yeah, I apologize. I shouldn't have said XYZ. And he kept on and on. I said, okay, enough's enough, really. You know, again, I was working with the very high risk guys at the time. So you got to allow for mistakes to be made, emotions to be expressed. Um, you can't go around pleasing people because it's not going to happen, man. You don't want to avoid secrets within the group setting. It's not good. And directive as needed. We nailed that about 15,000 times, but directive with flexibility, I can't say it enough, really. So Jeffrey Kotler comes along. He divides this up into three categories: personal commitment to the group. You got to be there. You got to want to be there. You got to be plugged in. That's commitment. Stamina. You got to have strength to withstand. Energy. You can't be like a deadbeat wall in the group. Passion. Honesty. Ability to hold on to sadness. Clients and deal with the client's pain. Empathy. Understanding the process the client feels. Again, empathy. Instill hope. Yes, instilling hope that something could be different, something could change, is a key characteristic in any therapy. Period. The client has to have hope that something could be different. A collaborative style with the client doesn't have preconceived ideas like too rigid. We all have ideas; they're all attached to us as therapists, but you don't want to be stuck in your own rigidity and stuff. You want to realize that's your lens and there's flexibility in the lens. Being there, being present, being plugged in, accessible to feedback, not just, well, you can't tell me that because I'm the therapist. Don't work that way. Um, and forgive others and self for mistakes. Skill level, know your stuff, man. I can tell you right now, a lot of therapists really don't know their stuff. I hate to insult folks. And when I started out, I didn't know my stuff as well either. But you learn, you study, you have to be plugged into the field of psychology therapy, and really at different aspects of psychology, like social psychology and such. Realize that you and the client co create the therapeutic reality and you're assigning meanings to stuff. Okay, my style, geez, I came up with six categories: therapist attitude, intervention skills, treatment planning, interpersonal therapeutic relationship, knowledge of philosophy and theory and therapy, or maybe it's five styles. Anyway, your attitude is everything. So you don't want to come off judgmental. You want to be respectful. You want to emphasize change. You want to have a hopeful orientation that something can actually come about in this context, such as change. You want to be sincere. Intervention. Yeah, attitude is everything. Intervention skills. You got to be able to. There's a range of skills out there that's unbelievable. And you got to know what you like and what you really are uncomfortable with. And the range goes from very basic to very advanced skill. Um, and so everything in between. You want to use humor as appropriately, but you don't want to laugh at the client. You want to laugh with the clients. I mentioned there's a range of skills. There's a range of communication skills alone. So you want to reinforce appropriate behavior, use tactics that are relevant to that client situation, client issues, group norms, group culture, if you will. Don't monopolize the session because it's not preaching and giving a sermon. Let the group emerge. Let members talk about stuff. Use generalized appropriate self-disclosure. If you're going to disclose something, make sure you're okay with it going on a billboard. Because once it's out there, it's out there. Depends on what type of group you have. Just be careful when you self-disclose. In the old days, 60s, 70s, early 80s, self-disclosure was the theme. And it is no longer the theme that I know of. Give concise feedback when needed, but you can give very unconcise feedback if you're trying to use it as a shock value, as a confusion technique, as some other piece where the client is trying to make sense of what you're saying because they're really tuned into that. Otherwise, give concise feedback. Use other opportunities that affect change as they emerge. You want to link issues together if you're in a group. Uh, Utilize whatever the client responses are towards goals. Don't say, "Oh, crap, this didn't go the way I wanted to," and it's all defeated. Utilize it. Like Milton Erickson, the great Milton Erickson, is another one of my heroes in psychotherapy. So utilize the behavior towards goals. There's If you get stuck, there's always the basic therapeutic communication skills you can fall back on. You can challenge and confront when necessary, but do it appropriately. I mentioned handling transference and countertransference. Manage it. 30 years ago, I had people looking at me that were 20 years older as I was their father figure. I mean, hell, now it would look like their father figure, but back then I was in my 30s, 40s, 50s, and I was not. But they would still project. So you can work with the material in a group. Manage your group conflicts appropriately. Work with resistance appropriately. Timing is good. Some people will say that's the essence of it all. Good Bad timing, the intervention could flop. Good timing, intervention takes. I don't look at resistance as resistance anymore. I look at it as reluctance. Resistance has that concrete connotation of being stuck forever, and I don't like that. So reluctance. The client is reluctant to change. And of course, you manage the power dynamics. Now, treatment planning, you got to select the treatment targets, blah, 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 based on the case, the individual, what kind of group you're running. Reformulate the case plans as needed. Things change. Try to pick out interventions that are going to be useful. So you got to be flexible enough to shift the plans and positions to make it work. So you can translate identifiable problems into goals and objectives, interventions, and what you expect to happen and what actually happens. Monitor the outcome. Interpersonal relationship means that you're not enmeshed. Some therapists will get enmeshed with clients, not good. You want to keep that distance because once you get emotionally enmeshed with the client, the boundaries are so blurred you cannot view the client objectively in any form, shape, or fashion. Okay, so in other words, don't enable the client's problems behavior. Rapport needs to be quickly established, but not only quickly established, rapport needs to be maintained. Don't want to be defensive or aggressive. Don't allow perpetrations and don't perpetrate it as yourself. Don't overprotect clients either. Let them experience some stuff. Sometimes you might have to be right there supportive. So summarized, got a nice little summary. Um, it's pretty much everything that I've said. You don't want to come across narcissistic, that you have all the answers, that you're the greatest thing since sliced bread. So you don't want to come across authoritarian or a dictator or a king, as we seem to have some issues with that these days. You don't want to be overly passive or aggressive. You want to be comfortable with the material. You want to be plugged in emotionally and psychologically. You don't work on your own issues. So manage the transference, manage your own counter transference. Maintain appropriate structure conducive to change. You're directing the group with a lot of flexibility, but you're still in charge. Yeah, you can have all the equalitarian type relationship you want with the group members, but ultimately you're in charge of the group. And how you distribute that power depends on your style. So flexibility, avoid power struggles, and take responsibility for your mistakes. Okay, we've already talked about that. Avoid secrets. So there's two issues that come about. Well, there's a number of issues, but let's say members focus on both interpersonal. It should be, yeah, it's intrapersonal means their own issues, Member wise, interpersonal is the group interactions. And the whole point of group is the group interactions. And metapersonal, both interplay back and forth. Excuse me. In the summary, I want to say know your stuff, understand your basic philosophies. I mean, you're not going to be Dr. Durant type scholar in philosophy, but know how you operate and the theories you like, the theories you use, the integration pieces. Understand what you're doing, why you're doing it, and again, a conclusion and some concluding thoughts on that. The whole thing of this is the therapist's characteristics and leadership styles. Your own group persona makes a difference. Watch the vibes that you give out. Very, very important. I think one time I was coming back from group. I'm coming to group. I was just got off the phone with the administration. I'm sure they had said something non-cynical nonsense, and apparently I decided to react to it. And so one of the group members could tell that I was out of sorts, really wasn't in tune, had my own shit going on, if you will. And so that's the vibe I was giving out, walking to group. He said, basically, you need to get your shit together. We have group today. We have group in a minute. And so that was a cue to me that I had to do some very quick RET. Back then we called it rational emotive therapy, RET. Restructured my thinking, identify what was going on, restructured it. Time I hit group, man, I was ready to do group. Any behavior you admit could make a difference and could be considered an intervention in group or therapy or any session. Once the session begins, it's on until it ends and the client is gone. It all counts. Remember, you can't be perfect. You're going to screw up. You're going to make mistakes. Learn from them because perfection is a myth, according to Dr. Rudolf Dreikers and the Adlerians. You're going to be imperfect.